The scent of death lingered in the summer air of Apache Junction as Zara Miller stepped off the stagecoach, her worn leather boots touching Arizona Territory soil for the first time. The year was 1878, and the promise of a new life hung before her like a mirage, tempting but seemingly just beyond reach. 23 years of hard living had etched permanent lines around her eyes, making her appear older than her years. Her once fine dress, now mended in several places, betrayed the remnants of a more genteel upbringing, one she'd left behind in Boston along with her reputation. "Last stop, Apache Junction," the driver called out, tossing down her single carpetbag with little ceremony. Zara caught it deftly, accustomed to handling her own affairs. The small frontier town sprawled before her, a dusty main street lined with wooden buildings, the distant mountains providing a dramatic backdrop to this remote outpost of civilization in the Arizona Territory. A few curious glances were cast her way, but most folks went about their business with the practiced indifference of those accustomed to strangers passing through. She had exactly $17.42 to her name, sewn carefully into the lining of her dress. It would have to be enough to start over. Again. The Wayfarers' Inn stood at the far end of the street, its weathered sign creaking in the hot desert wind. Zara straightened her shoulders and walked forward with determined steps. She'd written ahead for the waitressing position, and Mrs. Holloway had seemed desperate enough in her reply to overlook the vagueness of Zara's references. "You must be the girl from back east," a voice called out as Zara approached the inn's porch. A plump woman with graying hair tucked beneath a pristine white cap emerged from the doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "Yes, madam, Zara Miller. I've come about the position, Mrs." Holloway's eyes narrowed slightly as they took in Zara's appearance, the travel-worn clothes, the guarded expression, the way she stood as if ready to flee at the first hint of trouble. Well, you're here, and I'm short-handed. Rooms upstairs, last door on the left. Get settled and be down in an hour. Dinner rush starts early." Zara nodded gratefully, relieved there would be no further questions. At least not yet. The room was small but clean, a narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked mirror, and a window overlooking the dusty street below. Zara unpacked her meager belongings. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a nightgown, a hairbrush with several missing bristles, and a small silver locket containing a faded photograph of her parents. They had died of influenza when she was 16, leaving her at the mercy of an uncle who had proven to have none. She changed into her least worn dress, splashed water on her face, and pinned her dark hair into a neat bun. The woman staring back from the mirror looked tired but resolute. This time would be different. This time, no one would know about her past. The dining room of the Wayfarers' Inn was already half full when Zara descended the stairs. Mrs. Holloway handed her an apron without ceremony and pointed to a tray of food waiting to be served. "Table by the window," she instructed. "And mind you smile. Folks come here for the hospitality as much as the food." Zara nodded, forcing her lips into what she hoped passed for a welcoming expression. She'd learned early that a smile could be worn like armor. The first few hours passed in a blur of food trays, coffee refills, and the forced pleasantries of service. By the time the supper rush slowed, Zara's feet ached in her too tight boots, but she felt a small sense of accomplishment. No one had looked at her with recognition or suspicion. No whispers had followed in her wake. Just as she was clearing the last of the tables, the batwing doors swung open, admitting a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. The dining room fell momentarily quiet as the man stepped fully inside, removing his wide-brimmed hat to reveal sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of a storm-tossed sea. "Evening, Mrs. Holloway," he called out, his voice carrying the slight drawl of a man who spent more time with cattle than people. "Got room for one more hungry soul?" "For you, Tucker Nathans, always," the innkeeper replied with more warmth than she'd shown Zara all day. "Sit anywhere you like. We've got a new girl serving tonight." Tucker Nathans nodded politely in Zara's direction as he took a seat at a corner table. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but there was an unmistakable dignity in his bearing that set him apart from the usual drifters. "Coffee, please," he said when Zara approached, his gaze direct but not intrusive. "And whatever's hot from the kitchen." "Yes, sir," Zara replied, grateful for his straightforward manner. As she turned to go, his voice stopped her. "You're new to Apache Junction." It wasn't a question, but Zara answered anyway. "Just arrived today." "Well, welcome." His smile transformed his weathered face, erasing years of sun and hardship. "It's a good town once you get to know it." Something in his tone, a sincerity untainted by ulterior motives, made Zara pause. "I hope to find that true, Mr. Nathans." She hurried back to the kitchen, unsettled by the brief exchange. It had been a long time since she'd engaged in conversation that wasn't colored by her reputation or by her wariness of men's intentions. Tucker Nathans seemed different, but Zara had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. The remainder of the evening passed without incident. Tucker ate his meal quietly, left a generous tip, and departed with a nod in Zara's direction. Only after he'd gone did Mrs. Holloway provide any information. "That's Tucker Nathans," she said, collecting the payment he'd left. "Owns the Double N Ranch about 10 miles outside of town. Decent sort, keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings." Zara merely nodded, storing away the information without comment. The less interest she showed in the town's inhabitants, the less likely they were to show interest in her. After cleaning the dining room, Zara finally retired to her small room, her body aching from the long day's work. Through the thin walls, she could hear the muted sounds of the saloon next door, piano music, laughter, the occasional raised voice. The familiar soundtrack of a frontier town settling into its evening rhythms. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories she couldn't outrun, no matter how many miles she put between herself and Boston. The face of James Thornton, her former employer, loomed large in her dreams, his initial kindness turning to something darker, his wife's accusations, the public humiliation that followed. No one had believed that she'd fought off his advances. No one had wanted to hear her side of the story. Ruined, they'd called her. Damaged goods. A woman without virtue. Zara woke before dawn, her nightgown damp with sweat despite the cool desert night. She dressed by the dim light filtering through her window, resolving yet again to bury the past. Apache Junction knew nothing of Zara Miller. Here, she could be whoever she chose to be. By the time the first rays of sunlight touched the distant mountains, Zara was already at work in the inn's kitchen, kneading dough for the day's bread. Mrs. Holloway seemed pleased by her initiative, nodding approvingly as she surveyed the already swept floors and set tables. "You're an early riser," she commented. "That'll serve you well here." "I don't require much sleep," Zara replied, which was true enough, though not by choice. The morning crowd consisted mostly of travelers preparing to journey onward, and a few local businessmen starting their day with coffee and conversation. Zara served them efficiently, keeping her interactions brief but polite. No one seemed particularly interested in the new waitress, which suited her perfectly. It wasn't until mid-morning that the first whispers reached her ears. "That's her," a woman's voice carried from a corner table. The new girl at the Wayfarers came in on yesterday's stage. Wonder what she's running from, replied her companion. Women don't come to places like Apache Junction unless they're following a man or fleeing one. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she refilled coffee cups at a nearby table, but she kept her expression neutral. Gossip was inevitable in small towns. It didn't mean they knew anything specific. The bell above the door jangled, and Tucker Nathans entered, accompanied by an older man whose clothing marked him as one of the town's more prosperous citizens. They took a table near the window, deep in conversation. "Telling you, Nathans, that Southern pasture would double your operation," the older man was saying. "Price is fair, considering the water rights alone." "Fair by Phoenix standards, maybe," Tucker replied, his tone amicable but firm. "But steep for land that's going to need clearing and fencing before it's of any use." Zara approached their table, coffee pot in hand. "Good morning, gentlemen. Coffee, please," Tucker answered, offering that same direct smile from the previous evening. "And 2 breakfast plates, if Mrs. Holloway hasn't run out of those biscuits yet." "Coming right up," Zara replied, filling their cups. The older man studied her with undisguised curiosity. "Haven't seen you before. I'm Gerald Parsons, owner of Parsons Mercantile down the street." "Zara Miller," she responded with a polite nod. "Just started yesterday." "Miller," Parsons repeated as if testing the name. "From where originally?" Zara hesitated, aware of Tucker's attentive gaze. "Back east," she said finally. "Excuse me, I should place your order." As she retreated to the kitchen, she could feel Parsons' eyes following her. Something in his expression had shifted at her vague answer, a hint of suspicion that made her stomach clench with familiar dread. Throughout the day, Zara noticed more curious glances cast her way. Apache Junction was small enough that a new face attracted attention, particularly a single woman of marriageable age. She did her best to deflect questions about her background, offering only the most general information when pressed. By closing time, Zara's nerves were frayed from the constant vigilance. As she swept the dining room floor after the last customer had departed, Mrs. Holloway approached with an envelope in hand. "This came for you on the afternoon stage," she said, watching Zara's reaction carefully. "From Boston." Zara's heart lurched painfully as she took the letter. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Caroline Bradford, the only friend who had stood by her through the scandal. Caroline had promised to forward any important correspondence, but Zara hadn't expected anything so soon. "Thank you," she managed, slipping the envelope into her apron pocket. She would read it later, away from curious eyes. Mrs. Holloway lingered, her expression unreadable. "Boston's a long way from Apache Junction." "Yes," Zara agreed, continuing her sweeping. "It is." "I don't pry into my employees' affairs," the older woman said after a pause. "Lord knows everyone's entitled to their secrets, but Apache Junction's a small place, Miss Miller. Secrets have a way of finding daylight here." With that cryptic warning, Mrs. Holloway returned to her kitchen, leaving Zara alone with her thoughts and the unopened letter burning a hole in her pocket. Later, safe in her room with the door locked, Zara finally broke the seal on Caroline's letter. Inside was a brief note from her friend, along with a newspaper clipping that made her blood run cold. "Dearest Zara," Caroline had written, "this appeared in yesterday's paper. I fear Mr. Thornton is not content to let the matter rest. Please be careful. Your loving friend, Caroline." The clipping was short but devastating. Notice: information sought regarding the whereabouts of Miss Zara Miller, formerly employed by the household of James and Alina Thornton. Miss Miller departed Boston under questionable circumstances following serious accusations. A reward is offered for verified information. Contact J. Thornton at the address below. Zara's hands shook as she read the notice a second time, then a third. James Thornton was looking for her. Whether motivated by vengeance or some more sinister purpose, he wasn't allowing her to simply disappear. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, the paper clutched in her trembling fingers. How long before someone in Apache Junction made the connection? Before someone wrote to claim Thornton's reward. The stagecoach that had brought her here also brought mail and newspapers from the east. It was only a matter of time. Sleep eluded Zara that night, her mind racing with contingency plans. By morning, she had resolved to continue as normal while setting aside as much of her wages as possible. When the inevitable happened, she would be ready to move on. The dining room was unusually busy the next morning, filled with cowboys from the surrounding ranches who had come to town for supplies. Zara moved efficiently between tables, grateful for the work that kept her too busy for conversation. She was refilling a coffee cup when the front door opened, and a well-dressed woman entered, accompanied by a younger female companion. The newcomers surveyed the room with the slightly disdainful air of those unaccustomed to establishments like the Wayfarers' Inn. "Mrs. Carson, Mrs." Holloway greeted the older woman. "This is an unexpected pleasure. What brings you into town today?" "Millinery supplies," Mrs. Carson replied, removing her gloves. "The selection at Parsons is always so limited. We're catching the afternoon stage to Phoenix." Mrs. Carson's gaze fell on Zara, who had paused in her duties. "And who is this?" "My new waitress, Zara Miller," Mrs. Holloway said. "Just started with us." "Indeed." Mrs. Carson's eyebrows rose slightly. "From where, Miss Miller?" "Back east, madam," Zara replied with her now practiced response. "How interesting," Mrs. Carson murmured, though her tone suggested otherwise. "My late husband had business associates in Boston. Perhaps you knew some of them." Zara felt a chill run down her spine at the mention of Boston. "I doubt it, madam. Boston is a large city." "Yes, but certain circles are quite small," Mrs. Carson persisted. "The Thorntons, for instance. Eleanor Thornton and I were at finishing school together." The coffee pot nearly slipped from Zara's grasp. She set it down carefully, aware that several pairs of eyes were now watching the exchange with interest. "I'm afraid I wouldn't know, madam," Zara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, I have other customers waiting." As she retreated to the kitchen, Zara could hear Mrs. Carson's voice, deliberately pitched to Carrie. "How strange. I could have sworn I'd heard the name Miller recently in connection with the Thorntons." By mid-afternoon, Zara could feel the change in the air. Customers lingered longer at their tables, their gazes following her movements. Conversations hushed when she approached, only to resume in urgent whispers after she walked away. Mrs. Holloway called her into the small office behind the kitchen just before the dinner rush. Her expression was grave as she gestured for Zara to close the door. "Miss Miller," she began without preamble, "I've had some concerning information brought to my attention today." Zara stood straight, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Yes, madam." Mrs. Carson claims to have received a letter from her friend in Boston, mentioning a young woman named Zara Miller who left under scandalous circumstances. Mrs. Holloway's gaze was direct. "She says this young woman was accused of improper relations with her married employer." The words hung in the air between them, ugly and damning. Zara felt her carefully constructed new beginning crumbling around her. "It's not true," she said quietly. "Mr. Thornton attempted to force his attentions on me. When I resisted, Mrs. Thornton found us struggling. She chose to believe I had encouraged him." Mrs. Holloway studied her for a long moment. "That may well be true, Miss Miller, but perception matters in a place like this. The Carsons are influential in Apache Junction. Already, there's talk. I understand, Zara said, though her throat felt tight with unshed tears. I'll pack my things. To her surprise, Mrs. Holloway shook her head. I'm not asking you to leave, at least not yet. You're a good worker and I'm short-handed, but I won't lie to you. It's going to be difficult for you here now. Zara nodded, grateful for even this small reprieve. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. The older woman sighed heavily. Don't thank me yet. The real test will be how the customers react. Now get back out there. Dinner won't serve itself. The evening that followed was one of the most difficult of Zara's life. Though no one openly confronted her, she felt the weight of judgment in every glance, every hushed conversation that stopped when she approached. Several of the more respectable townspeople who regularly dined at the Wayfarers were conspicuously absent. Just as she was clearing the last table, the doors swung open and Tucker Nathans entered. He paused just inside, his gaze sweeping the nearly empty dining room before settling on Zara. Something in his expression told her he'd heard the rumors. "Evening, Miss Miller," he said, removing his hat. "Is the kitchen still open?" "Just closing, but I'm sure we can find something," Zara replied, keeping her voice professional despite the weariness that threatened to overwhelm her. "Please have a seat." As she turned to go, Tucker spoke again, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "People talk a lot in small towns, Miss Miller. Doesn't mean they know what they're talking about." Zara froze, then slowly faced him. "Thank you, Mr. Nathans. But I've found that once talk starts, the truth hardly matters." His eyes held hers steadily. "Maybe, but it matters to some of us." She nodded once, unable to trust her voice, and hurried to the kitchen to prepare a plate for him. When she returned, Tucker was the only customer left in the dining room. He ate in silence while she wiped down the counter and set chairs on tables for the night. Finally, he pushed his empty plate away and reached for his hat. "Thank you for the meal, Miss Miller. It was excellent as always." "You're welcome," Zara replied, gathering his dishes. She hesitated, then added, "I'm surprised you came in tonight." Tucker stood, settling his hat on his head. "Because of the gossip. I make up my own mind about people, Miss Miller, always have." "And what have you decided about me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. A small smile crossed his face. "That you're someone who deserves a fair chance, same as anyone." He reached into his pocket and placed payment on the table. "Good night." After he left, Zara found he'd left twice the normal amount for his meal. The gesture of kindness, small as it was, nearly undid her composure. She pocketed the money with trembling fingers, wondering how much longer she could remain in Apache Junction now that her past had caught up with her. The answer came sooner than she'd expected. The following morning, Mrs. Holloway met her in the kitchen with an apologetic expression. "I've had word from several of our regular customers," she said without preamble. "They've made it clear they won't patronize the Wayfarers as long as you're employed here." Zara nodded, having anticipated this development. "I understand. I'll collect my things." "I'm sorry, girl," Mrs. Holloway said, and she seemed genuinely regretful. "For what it's worth, I believe your version of events, but I can't afford to lose the business." "Of course not," Zara agreed, keeping her voice level. "You've been fair with me, Mrs. Holloway, more than most would have been." The older woman pressed a small envelope into Zara's hands. "Your wages plus a bit extra. The stage leaves for Tucson at noon. Might be best if you were on it. Tucson. Another new beginning. Another place to hide until the whispers caught up with her again." Zara felt a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. How long could she keep running? How far would be far enough? She was packing her meager belongings when a knock sounded at her door. Opening it cautiously, she was surprised to find Tucker Nathan standing in the hallway, hat in hand. Mr. Nathan's, she said, unable to hide her confusion. What are you doing here? I heard what happened, he replied, his expression grave. Mrs. Holloway mentioned you're leaving on the noon stage. News travels fast, Zara observed, returning to her packing. She left the door open, tacit permission for him to enter if he wished. Tucker stepped just inside the doorway, respectfully keeping his distance. That's the nature of small towns. For better or worse. Mostly worse in my experience, Zara said with a bitter smile, folding her spare dress into the carpet bag. I have a proposition for you, Miss Miller, Tucker said after a moment, if you're willing to hear it. Zara paused, wariness creeping into her posture. She'd heard propositions from men before, and they rarely ended well for women in her position. What kind of proposition? An honorable one, Tucker assured her, seeming to read her thoughts. I need a housekeeper at the Double N. My previous one left last month to get married, and the place is, well, it's in need of a woman's touch. A housekeeper, Zara repeated slowly. At your ranch? Yes. The pay is good, better than what you were making here. You'd have your own quarters in the main house, meals provided. It's honest work. Zara studied him, trying to discern his true motives. Why would you offer this to me? You hardly know me, and what you've heard can't be flattering. Tucker met her gaze directly. I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Miller, and I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Even a woman ruined by scandal, she challenged. His expression softened slightly. Especially then. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. None of us is without regrets or mistakes. Zara considered his offer. The stage to Tucson represented another unknown, another town where she would arrive friendless and alone. At least here, she knew the nature of the whispers she faced. The ranch is isolated, Tucker continued when she remained silent. 10 miles from town means 10 miles from gossip. My cowhands don't come to the main house, and they know better than to discuss ranch business in town. And what will people say about you, Mr. Nathan's? Zara asked. Hiring a woman like me. Let them talk, he replied with a shrug. My reputation can weather it. Zara closed her carpetbag, decision made. When would you want me to start? A smile spread across Tucker's weathered face. Today, if you're willing. My buggy's out front. We can leave whenever you're ready. An hour later, Zara found herself seated beside Tucker in his buggy, heading away from Apache Junction toward the mountains that cradled the Double N Ranch. The desert landscape spread around them, austere and beautiful in the morning light. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, Zara felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. They'll still talk, you know, she said after they'd traveled in comfortable silence for several miles. The good people of Apache Junction. Tucker's hands were steady on the reins, his profile strong against the backdrop of the vast Arizona sky. Let them. Words only have the power we give them. Is that what you believe? Zara asked, genuinely curious. That we can simply ignore what others say about us? Not ignore, Tucker corrected, but we can choose whether to let it define us. He glanced at her briefly. They said you were ruined by your past, Miss Miller. I say the past is just that, past. What matters is what you build from here. Zara considered his words, finding an unexpected comfort in them. And what are you building at the Double N, Mr. Nathan's? A smile touched his lips. A future, just like everyone else. As they crested a rise, the Double N spread before them, a sprawling ranch nestled against the foothills. A large, two-story house stood at its center, surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and a stream wound through the property like a silver ribbon. It's beautiful, Zara said softly. It's home, Tucker replied simply. Or it will be once it's properly finished. My father started it, but he didn't live to see it completed. I've been working on it piece by piece. As they approached the ranch house, Zara could see that it was indeed a work in progress. The main structure was sound, but one wing remained partially constructed, with lumber stacked nearby awaiting use. "I hope you don't mind a bit of construction dust," Tucker said as he helped her down from the buggy. "I have men working on the east wing whenever I can spare them from ranch duties." "I don't mind at all," Zara assured him, taking in the sturdy craftsmanship of the finished portions. "It's lovely." Tucker carried her carpetbag as he led her into the house. The interior was spacious but sparsely furnished, with the functional necessities of a bachelor's residence but little in the way of comfort or decoration. "Kitchen's through there," Tucker said, pointing. "Pantry's well stocked. Dining room and study on this floor, bedrooms upstairs. Your quarters are at the end of the hall. The room with the east-facing window has its own small sitting room attached." Zara followed him up the wide staircase, noting the quality of the woodwork and the potential of the space. With proper furnishings and a woman's touch, the house could be truly magnificent. The room he'd designated for her was larger than she'd expected, with a comfortable bed, a dresser, and a washstand. The attached sitting room was small but pleasant, with a window seat overlooking the eastern pastures. "This is far too generous for a housekeeper," Zara protested. Tucker set her carpetbag on the bed. "It was meant to be a guest suite eventually. No sense leaving it empty when you can make use of it." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Get settled in. Come down when you're ready and I'll show you the rest of the house." Left alone, Zara unpacked her few belongings, marveling at the turn of events. Yesterday, she had been the subject of town gossip, on the verge of being run out of Apache Junction. Today, she had a position and a room more comfortable than any she'd occupied since her parents' death. The question of Tucker Nathan's true motives lingered at the edges of her mind. Men didn't typically offer positions to women with tarnished reputations without expecting something in return. Yet nothing in his manner suggested ulterior motives. He had been unfailingly respectful, maintaining appropriate distance and making no improper suggestions. Perhaps, Zara thought as she smoothed her dress and prepared to go downstairs, Tucker Nathan's was simply that rarity, a genuinely decent man. Or perhaps his motives would become clear in time. Either way, she was grateful for the reprieve, however temporary it might prove to be. The tour of the house revealed a dwelling in desperate need of a woman's organizational skills. While clean enough, it lacked the systematic order that transformed a structure into a home. Cupboards held a haphazard assortment of dishes, linens were stuffed randomly into drawers, and dust had settled into corners overlooked by the infrequent cleaning. "I can see I have my work cut out for me," Zara observed as they concluded the tour in the kitchen. Tucker's expression was sheepish. "I warned you it needed attention. My skills lie more with cattle than housekeeping." "Clearly," Zara agreed, but her tone was light. "When do your men come in for meals?" "They don't mostly," Tucker explained. "The bunkhouse has its own cook. Old Pedro's been feeding the hands for 15 years. You'd only be cooking for me, and occasionally for visitors. Ranch business brings people by sometimes." The arrangement was better than Zara had anticipated. Less contact with the ranch hands meant fewer opportunities for gossip to spread about her presence. "And what are your expectations regarding meals and housekeeping?" she asked, slipping naturally into the role of efficient housekeeper. "Simple fare, served when it's ready," Tucker replied. "I'm not particular about times. Ranch work doesn't always allow for regular schedules. As for housekeeping, just keep things clean and orderly. I'm more concerned with function than appearance." Zara nodded, mentally cataloging the tasks she would need to tackle first. "I'll need supplies from town eventually. Is there a regular delivery?" Supply wagon comes out once a week, Tucker said, but I can take you in if you need anything specific. The thought of returning to Apache Junction so soon made Zara tense. That won't be necessary. I'm sure I can work with whatever's here for now. Tucker's expression told her he understood her reluctance. As you wish. I'll be around the property today if you need anything. Make yourself at home, Miss Miller. After he left, Zara stood in the kitchen, absorbing the quiet of the house. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of security, provisional though it might be. The Double N was remote enough to offer a buffer against the gossip of Apache Junction, yet not so isolated that she felt uncomfortable. She spent the remainder of the day taking inventory of the kitchen supplies and planning the evening meal. By the time Tucker returned at dusk, she had prepared a simple but hearty dinner of beef stew, cornbread, and apple cobbler using ingredients from the well-stocked pantry. "This is a far sight better than my usual fare," Tucker commented as they sat at the large dining table. He had insisted that she join him rather than serving and withdrawing as a traditional housekeeper might do. "I'm glad it meets with your approval," Zara replied, uncomfortable with the unusual arrangement but unwilling to argue on her first day. "I can prepare a menu for the week if you'd like to review it." Tucker shook his head, breaking a piece of cornbread. "No need. I trust your judgment." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "May I ask you something, Miss Miller?" Zara tensed slightly. "You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer." A small smile touched his lips. "Fair enough. I was wondering what brought you to Arizona territory." "It's a long way from Boston." The question was innocent enough, yet it treaded close to subjects Zara preferred to avoid. Still, he had offered her sanctuary when others would have shunned her. She owed him some measure of honesty. "I needed a fresh start," she said carefully. "Somewhere far from previous associations." Tucker nodded, accepting her vague response. "Arizona's good for fresh starts. Most folks out here are running from something or someone." "And you, Mr. Nathans, what are you running from?" The question surprised even Zara herself. Tucker's eyes met hers across the table, thoughtful rather than offended. "Not running, building. This land was my father's dream before it was mine. I'm just trying to finish what he started." "I didn't mean to pry," Zara said quickly. "You didn't," he assured her. "It's a natural question, and I don't mind answering it." He set down his fork. "My father came west after the war between the states. He'd fought for the Union, lost his family farm in Pennsylvania to debt while he was away. The government was practically giving land away out here to anyone willing to tame it. He staked his claim, started building this place with nothing but determination and two good hands." "And your mother?" Zara asked, drawn into the story despite herself. A shadow crossed Tucker's face. "She followed him west, bringing me along. I was just a boy then. She died of fever the second winter. Father raised me on his own after that, taught me everything about ranching. He died 5 years ago, thrown from a horse during a roundup." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, recognizing the lingering grief in his voice. "It must have been difficult, losing them both." Tucker nodded, his gaze distant. "It was. Still is sometimes, but they left me with this place and the knowledge to run it. Can't ask for much more than that." The simple dignity of his words touched something in Zara. Here was a man who had faced loss yet continued building, who valued legacy and honest work over easy gain. It made his kindness toward her seem less mysterious perhaps. He truly did believe in second chances. As the days passed, Zara settled into a routine at the Double N. She rose early each morning to prepare Tucker's breakfast before he headed out to work the ranch. During the day, she tackled the considerable task of bringing order to the household, one room at a time. Evenings were spent preparing dinner, which they ate together in the dining room, often discussing the events of the day. Gradually, the house began to reflect Zara's influence. Rooms that had been merely functional became comfortable and inviting. She discovered linens stored away in trunks, brought them out to replace worn ones, and arranged wildflowers from the property in simple pottery vases throughout the house. Tucker noted the changes with quiet approval. "The place hasn't looked this good since my mother was alive," he remarked one evening as they finished dinner. "She would have appreciated your touch, Miss Miller." "Thank you," Zara replied, pleased by the compliment. "I've enjoyed having a proper house to manage again." "Again?" Tucker inquired. "You've done this kind of work before." Zara realized her slip too late. "In a manner of speaking. My parents' home." She trailed off, unwilling to elaborate further on the comfortable Boston house where she had grown up, so different from the frontier dwelling she now tended. Tucker seemed to sense her discomfort and changed the subject. "I'll be heading into town tomorrow for supplies and to meet with the bank. Is there anything you need?" Zara considered the question. After 2 weeks at the Double N, she had exhausted some of the basic household supplies. "Yes, actually, I've made a list, and I'd like to order some fabric if possible. Several of the curtains are beyond repair and I thought I might make new ones." "Of course," Tucker agreed readily. "Write down what you need and I'll see to it." Zara hesitated, then asked, "How are things in town? Have the rumors died down at all?" Tucker's expression turned sympathetic. "People have short memories when it comes to those not directly in front of them. There's been talk of a stagecoach robbery near Tucson that's captured most of the gossip's attention lately." Relief washed over Zara. Perhaps in time she could venture into Apache Junction again without facing open hostility. "That's good to hear. Would you like to come with me tomorrow?" Tucker offered unexpectedly. "Might do you good to get off the ranch for a bit." The invitation was tempting. After 2 weeks of seeing no one but Tucker and occasionally some of the ranch hands at a distance, Zara found herself craving wider human contact. Yet the memory of whispers and judging glances held her back. "I think not," she said finally. "But thank you for the offer." Tucker nodded, accepting her decision without question. Another time, perhaps. That night, alone in her room, Zara found herself reflecting on her growing comfort at the Double N. Tucker Nathans had proven to be exactly what he appeared, a straightforward, decent man who treated her with unfailing respect. Not once had he made any improper advances, or even hinted at expectations beyond her duties as housekeeper. It was an unfamiliar experience for Zara, whose beauty had often attracted unwanted attention from men, regardless of their marital status. James Thornton had not been the first to assume that her genteel poverty made her available for conquest, merely the one whose actions had most thoroughly destroyed her reputation. Tucker's absence the following day left the house unusually quiet. Zara went about her usual tasks, but found herself watching the road for his return more often than was strictly necessary. The realization that she missed his presence was unsettling. Attachments were dangerous for someone in her position. They made leaving more difficult when the time came, as it inevitably would. Yet, as the afternoon stretched on, Zara couldn't deny that Tucker had become more than simply her employer. Their evening conversations had gradually extended beyond the day's events, to include discussions of books they had read, opinions on the territorial government's policies, and occasional reminiscences carefully edited on Zara's, part of their respective upbringings. It was friendship, Zara told herself firmly, nothing more. Tucker had given no indication that he viewed her as anything other than his housekeeper, and she had no right to imagine otherwise. The sound of approaching hoofbeats finally broke into her thoughts. Looking out the kitchen window, she saw Tucker returning, his wagon loaded with supplies. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by annoyance at her own reaction. She was becoming far too attached to this place and its owner. Tucker entered the kitchen with an armload of parcels, his expression brightening when he saw her. "Miss Miller, I hope the day treated you well." "Well enough," Zara replied, taking some of the packages from him. "And your business in town, was it successful?" "Mostly," Tucker said, setting down the remaining parcels. "Bank's willing to extend the loan for the East Wing construction, which is good news. And I got everything on your list, plus a few extras I thought might be useful." He reached into one of the packages and withdrew a small volume bound in blue leather. "Found this at Parsons' store. Thought you might enjoy it. You mentioned liking poetry." Zara accepted the book, a collection of Tennyson's poems, with surprise and genuine pleasure. "This is very thoughtful, Mr. Nathans. Thank you." Tucker shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her reaction. "Just saw it and thought of you, no great matter." But it was a great matter to Zara. The simple gift represented something she had rarely experienced: someone paying attention to her preferences, her pleasures, without expectation of return. It was dangerous precisely because it was so appealing. "There's something else," Tucker said, his tone turning more serious. "I heard talk in town today. Seems there was a letter at the post office asking about you." Zara's hand tightened on the book. "From Boston," Tucker nodded. "From a man named Thornton. Postmaster mentioned it to Parsons, who was telling anyone who'd listen about the scandalous woman who had the nerve to remain in the area." "I see," Zara said faintly, her momentary happiness evaporating. "So the rumors haven't died down after all." "Not entirely," Tucker admitted. "But they've shifted somewhat. There's a fair bit of speculation about your presence at the Double N now." "About us, you mean," Zara clarified, a flush rising to her cheeks. "They think I'm that we're." "People will think what they want to think," Tucker said firmly. "It doesn't matter what they say." "It matters to me," Zara replied, setting the book aside. "And it should matter to you. Your reputation, my reputation, is my own concern," Tucker interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "And frankly, Miss Miller, I care a good deal more about the truth than about gossip." "Even when the gossip contains elements of truth," Zara challenged, a surge of bitter honesty compelling her words. "James Thornton did try to seduce me. I did run from Boston in disgrace. Perhaps I am exactly what they say I am: a ruined woman." Tucker's expression remained steady, his eyes holding hers without judgment. "Then I'll build you a new tomorrow," he said simply. "One day at a time, if you'll let me." The words hung between them, charged with meaning beyond their simple construction. Zara found herself unable to look away from his gaze, unable to dismiss the sincerity she found there. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do that for someone you hardly know?" Tucker took a step closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of gray in his eyes, the lines that sun and wind had etched around them. "Because I see something in you worth fighting for, Zara Miller. A strength that didn't break even when the world tried to break you. A dignity that gossip couldn't take away." "You can't know that," Zara protested, though something in her longed to believe him. "You don't know what I've done, what I've been through." "I know enough," Tucker replied. "I know you face each day with courage, that you treat this house and the people in it with respect and care. I know you're educated and thoughtful, that you appreciate beauty and create order from chaos. The rest your past, your secrets, those are yours to share or keep as you choose." Tears burned behind Zara's eyes at his words. How long had it been since someone had seen her, truly seen her, beyond the label of ruined woman? Since someone had valued her for the person she was rather than judging her for circumstances beyond her control. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't need to say anything," Tucker assured her. "Just know that you have a place here for as long as you want it, on your terms. No obligations beyond those we've already agreed upon." The generosity of his offer was overwhelming. Zara found herself nodding, unable to form words past the tightness in her throat. Tucker seemed to understand, stepping back to give her space. "I'll bring in the rest of the supplies," he said. "Take your time." Left alone, Zara pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart beneath her fingers. Tucker's words had awakened something she had thought long dead: hope. Hope that perhaps she wasn't defined by her past after all. Hope that she might build something new here, in this remote corner of Arizona territory. It was a dangerous feeling for someone who had learned to expect the worst, who had trained herself to recognize when it was time to run again. Yet as she traced the embossed leather of the poetry book Tucker had given her, Zara couldn't help wondering if perhaps, just this once, hope might not be misplaced. The weeks that followed brought subtle changes to Zara's relationship with Tucker. They continued their evening conversations, but there was a new openness between them, a growing ease in each other's company. Tucker began inviting her to join him for short rides around the property in the evenings, showing her the streams and meadows that made the Double N one of the most valuable ranches in the territory. Gradually, Zara found herself sharing more about her past carefully at first, then with increasing candor as Tucker's accepting responses encouraged her. She told him about her childhood in Boston, her parents' deaths, her uncle's neglect that had forced her to seek employment as a companion and household manager for wealthy families. "And that's how you came to work for the Thorntons?" Tucker asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Zara nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Yes, Eleanor Thornton needed a companion and household manager. Her health was delicate, and her husband's business kept him away often. At first, it seemed an ideal position: good wages, comfortable living conditions, respectful treatment." "Until it wasn't," Tucker said quietly. "Until it wasn't," Zara agreed. James Thornton began finding reasons to be at home more often. His attention toward me became increasingly inappropriate. I tried to discourage him without causing a scene. I needed the position, you see. There was nowhere else for me to go. Tucker's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue at her own pace. One evening, when Mrs. Thornton was supposed to be at her sister's home, he cornered me in the library. When I refused his advances, he became aggressive. We struggled, and somehow Mrs. Thornton returned early and found us. She immediately assumed the worst, that I had enticed her husband, that I was the aggressor. "She didn't believe you," Tucker stated rather than asked. "Why would she?" Zara's smile was bitter. "It was her husband's word against mine. He claimed I had been pursuing him for weeks, that I had lured him to the library with promises of intimacy. By morning, I was dismissed without references, and the story was spreading through Boston society." Tucker's hand found hers, a gentle pressure that offered comfort without demand. "I'm sorry that happened to you. No one should have to endure such betrayal and injustice." The simple acknowledgement of her truth, the acceptance without question, brought tears to Zara's eyes. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. "I'd be a poor judge of character indeed if I didn't," Tucker replied, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "You're many things, Zara Miller, but a liar isn't one of them." They sat in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, their hands remaining joined as stars began to appear above them. It was a small intimacy, yet profound in its significance, the first time Zara had allowed a man to touch her, even so innocently, since James Thornton's assault. "My turn for a confession," Tucker said after a while. "I haven't been entirely forthcoming about my own past." Zara turned to look at him, curious rather than alarmed. "Oh." Tucker's expression was rueful in the gathering darkness. "Nothing scandalous, I'm afraid, just incomplete. I told you my father started this ranch after the war. What I didn't mention was that before that, he was a lawyer in Philadelphia, and he made sure I received an education to follow in his footsteps." "You studied law?" Zara asked, surprised. "At the University of Pennsylvania," Tucker confirmed. "Graduated and everything. Even practiced for a year in Philadelphia before my father fell ill and needed help with the ranch. I came west intending to stay just long enough to get things in order, then return to my practice." "But you stayed," Zara observed. Tucker nodded, his gaze sweeping over the darkened landscape of the ranch. "I found I loved this life more than I ever loved the law, the freedom of it, the honesty of working with your hands and seeing the tangible results of your labor. In a courtroom, nothing is ever truly settled. Out here, a fence built is a fence built." "I can understand that appeal," Zara said softly. "There's a simplicity to life here that Boston lacks." "Simplicity, yes," Tucker agreed, "but also complexity of a different sort. The land demands respect and understanding. The cattle, the weather, the water rights all have their own rules, more consistent than any written by men." As they talked, Zara realized that Tucker Nathans was a far more complex man than she had initially imagined. Beneath the straightforward rancher lay a keen legal mind, an appreciation for literature, and a philosophical bent that surprised and delighted her. Their conversations ranged ever wider, touching on politics, art, and the future of the Arizona Territory. In turn, Tucker seemed to take genuine pleasure in discovering the depths of Zara's education and intellect. Unlike many men of her acquaintance, he neither patronized her opinions nor seemed threatened by her knowledge. He engaged with her as an equal, challenging her when he disagreed, but always with respect for her perspective. It was a heady experience for Zara, who had spent so long carefully measuring her words, concealing her thoughts to avoid giving offense or drawing unwanted attention. With Tucker, she found herself speaking freely, laughing openly, feeling more herself than she had in years. The danger, of course, was that she was falling in love with him. The realization came to her one morning as she watched from the kitchen window while he worked with a young horse in the corral, patient, firm, respectful of the animal's spirit while guiding it toward partnership. It struck her with the force of physical pain that what she felt for Tucker Nathans went far beyond gratitude or friendship. It was impossible, of course. However kind he might be, however accepting of her past, the gulf between them remained. He was a respected rancher building a legacy. She was a woman with a tarnished reputation, forever one step ahead of scandal. The best she could hope for was to continue as his housekeeper, enjoying his friendship while keeping her deeper feelings carefully concealed. The arrival of the supply wagon from town a week later brought an unwelcome reminder of the world beyond the Double N. Among the mail was a newspaper from Phoenix, containing a notice that made Zara's blood run cold. Information sought regarding the whereabouts of Miss Zara Miller, formerly of Boston. Substantial reward offered. Contact J. Thornton, Boston, Massachusetts. The notice was larger than the previous one. The reward amount specified $500, a fortune that would tempt even those inclined to mind their own business. James Thornton was not giving up his pursuit. If anything, he seemed more determined than ever to find her. Tucker found her staring at the newspaper, her face pale. Without a word, he took it from her trembling hands and read the notice. "He's escalating," Zara whispered. $500. Someone will write to him. It's too much money to ignore. Tucker's expression hardened. Let them write. You're safe here. Am I? Zara challenged, fear making her voice sharp. How long before he comes himself? Before he brings accusations that even you can't dismiss? He's a wealthy man, Tucker, with connections and influence. And this is the Arizona territory, Tucker countered. His Boston connections mean little here. As for his accusations, let him make them. We know the truth. Zara shook her head, panic rising within her. You don't understand. Men like James Thornton don't accept defeat. He'll destroy anyone who stands in his way, including you. Let him try, Tucker said quietly, a steely resolve in his tone that Zara had never heard before. I'm not so easily destroyed, Zara. His use of her first name, rare, despite their growing closeness, momentarily distracted her from her fear. Tucker seemed to realize it as well, a faint flush coloring his tanned cheeks. Miss Miller, he corrected himself. Forgive the familiarity. No, Zara said quickly. Please. I'd like it if you called me Zara. After all we've shared, formality seems unnecessary. A smile touched his lips. Zara, then. And you must call me Tucker. The moment of personal connection eased some of Zara's panic, but the underlying fear remained. James Thornton's persistence suggested a motive beyond simple vengeance. What could he possibly hope to gain by finding her, months after she had fled Boston? I should leave, she said abruptly. Go further west, California, perhaps, somewhere he won't think to look. Running won't solve anything, Tucker argued. He'll just continue the search. And you'll spend your life looking over your shoulder, never staying anywhere long enough to build a real life. What alternative do I have? Zara demanded. Wait for him to find me, to bring his accusations here, where they'll be believed because he's a wealthy man from a respected family. Tucker was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. There might be another way, he said finally, a way to make his accusations meaningless regardless of who believes them. What way? Zara asked, skepticism evident in her tone. Tucker met her gaze directly. Marry me. The words hung between them, impossible and extraordinary. Zara stared at him, certain she had misheard. What did you say? Marry me, Tucker repeated, his voice steady despite the faint color in his cheeks. As my wife, you'd have my name, my protection. Even if Thornton found you, his accusations about your past would carry far less weight. A husband's word counts for more than a former employer's, especially out here. You can't be serious, Zara whispered. I'm perfectly serious, Tucker assured her. It's a practical solution to your problem. Practical, Zara echoed, the word cutting more deeply than it should have. Of course his proposal would be practical rather than romantic. What had she expected? Tucker seemed to read her disappointment. That came out wrong, he said, taking a step closer. Zara, I'm not offering marriage merely as a practical arrangement, though it would serve that purpose. I'm offering because I've come to care for you, deeply. Hope flared within her, quickly tempered by caution. You can't know that. We've known each other only a few months. Some things don't require years to recognize, Tucker replied. I know that I enjoy your company more than anyone else's, that I find myself thinking about you when we're apart, that the house feels empty when you're not in it. His words mirrored Zara's own feelings so closely that she found herself speechless. Could it be possible that what she felt for him was reciprocated? That this honorable, intelligent, kind man might truly want her as his wife, not out of pity or practicality but out of genuine affection? You deserve better than a ruined woman, she said finally, voicing her deepest fear. Tucker's expression softened. There you go again, accepting other people's judgments as truth. You're not ruined, Zara. You're the strongest, most resilient person I know. He took her hand gently, his touch warm and reassuring. "I won't pretend that marriage to me would be easy. Ranching is hard work and the double N is still a work in progress. But we could build something good here together, if you wanted to." The sincerity in his voice, the open affection in his eyes, broke through the last of Zara's defenses. This was real, not pity, not obligation, but genuine feeling. Tucker Nathans, who had every reason to protect his reputation and future, was offering to bind his life to hers, to face whatever consequences might come from James Thornton's vendetta. "I don't know what to say," Zara admitted, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his offer. "You don't have to answer now," Tucker assured her, releasing her hand. "Take some time, think about it. Whatever you decide, you'll still have a place here." Zara nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you." That night, alone in her room, Zara found sleep elusive as she considered Tucker's proposal. Marriage had never been part of her plans after Boston. She had assumed that her reputation, once tarnished, had eliminated that possibility forever. Even if she found a man willing to overlook her past, as Tucker seemed to be, how could she trust again after James Thornton's betrayal? Yet, Tucker was nothing like Thornton. In the months she had known him, he had demonstrated only respect and kindness. He had offered her sanctuary when others would have shunned her, believed her story without question, and treated her as an equal rather than a servant or an object of desire. And beyond all that, she loved him. The realization had crept up on her gradually, taking root in shared conversations, quiet evenings on the porch, the undemanding comfort of his presence. She loved his integrity, his quiet strength, the way he built rather than destroyed, the respect he showed to all living things. Could she build a life with him? Bear his children, share his name, stand beside him as the double N grew into the legacy he envisioned? The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Morning found Zara still undecided but leaning toward acceptance. She prepared breakfast as usual, her mind racing with possibilities. When Tucker entered the kitchen, she could sense his restraint, his determination not to pressure her for an answer. "Good morning," he said simply, accepting the coffee she offered. "Sleep well?" "Not particularly," Zara admitted. "I had a lot to think about." Tucker nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, take all the time you need." His consideration only strengthened Zara's inclination. This was a man who respected her enough to give her space for such an important decision, who didn't use emotional manipulation to get his way. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she began, setting her own coffee cup on the table and sitting across from him. "And?" Tucker prompted gently when she hesitated. "And I'm inclined to accept," Zara said carefully, "but I need to be sure you understand what you'd be taking on. James Thornton is a vindictive man with resources at his disposal. Your reputation could suffer by association with mine." "Are you truly prepared for that?" Tucker's expression remained steady. "I am. My reputation is built on actions, not gossip. The people who matter my ranch hands, my business associates judge me by how I treat them, not by whom I marry. And children?" Zara pressed, forcing herself to address the most difficult questions. "If we have children, they might someday face questions about their mother's past." "Children are resilient," Tucker replied, "and they'll have parents who love them and teach them to value truth over rumor. Besides, the West is changing rapidly. By the time our children are grown, today's gossip will be long forgotten. Our children." The phrase sent a flutter through Zara's heart, the possibility of family, of belonging, of creating life with this man who spoke of the future with such quiet confidence. "There's one more thing," Zara said, gathering her courage. "If we marry, it should be a real marriage in all respects. I won't have you sleeping in separate quarters out of some misguided sense of chivalry. If you're to be my husband, I want everything that entails." A flush rose to Tucker's cheeks, but his gaze remained steady. "I want that too, Zara, very much. But only when you're ready, only when you're certain." The tenderness in his voice, the respect implicit in his response, confirmed what Zara already knew in her heart. This was a man she could trust with her body as well as her future, a man who would never use her or discard her as James Thornton had attempted to do. "Then yes," she said softly. "Yes, Tucker Nathans, I will marry you." The smile that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, radiant, warming, full of promise. He reached across the table to take her hands in his. "You've made me a very happy man, Zara Miller." "Soon to be Zara Nathans," she reminded him, her own smile matching his. "Indeed," Tucker agreed, squeezing her hands gently. "How soon would you like to make it official? The circuit judge won't be through Apache Junction for another month, but we could ride to Phoenix if you'd prefer not to wait." Zara considered the question. Part of her wanted to marry immediately, to secure the protection of Tucker's name as quickly as possible. Yet another part felt they deserved the time to prepare properly, to make their union a true celebration rather than a rushed affair. "Let's wait for the circuit judge," she decided. "That gives us a month to prepare and to be certain." Tucker nodded, understanding her need for time. "A month it is, though I won't change my mind if that's your concern." "Nor will I," Zara assured him, "but I'd like to have a proper wedding, even a small one. Something to mark the occasion as special." "Whatever you want," Tucker promised. "The Double N can afford a celebration." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and into Apache Junction. To Zara's surprise, the reaction was largely positive. The ranch hands offered hearty congratulations, several of their wives rode out to meet her, and even Mrs. Holloway sent a note expressing best wishes. There were whispers, of course. The story of Zara's scandalous past hadn't been entirely forgotten. But Tucker's standing in the community, combined with the months Zara had spent quietly proving herself a respectable housekeeper, seemed to have blunted the edge of the gossip. More importantly, Tucker remained unfazed by any negative talk, his commitment to their future unwavering. As the wedding day approached, Zara found herself increasingly at peace with her decision. The Double N no longer felt like a temporary sanctuary, but like home, a place where she belonged, where she could build the future that had seemed impossible in the wake of Boston's rejection. The night before the circuit judge was due to arrive, Zara stood on the porch watching the sunset, her heart full of anticipation and a quiet joy she had never expected to experience. Tomorrow, she would become Zara Nathans, wife of a respected rancher, mistress of the Double N. The thought no longer frightened her. Instead, it filled her with a sense of rightness, of coming home after a long journey. Tucker joined her on the porch, his presence a familiar comfort at her side. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Not nervous," Zara replied honestly. "Just reflective. A year ago, I could never have imagined this moment." "Nor I," Tucker admitted. "I'd resigned myself to bachelorhood. The ranch kept me too busy for courting, and most women don't take kindly to the isolation out here." "Their loss," Zara said softly, leaning against his shoulder. "I can't imagine a better place to be." Tucker's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "I love you, Zara Miller," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "I should have said it properly before asking you to marry me. But I do love you with all my heart." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, tears of happiness rather than sorrow. "I love you too, Tucker, more than I can express." Their lips met in a gentle kiss, filled with promise and tenderness. It was not their first. They had shared increasingly intimate moments as their wedding day approached, but it held a special significance on this eve of their union. The sound of an approaching rider broke the moment. Tucker straightened, his hand moving instinctively to the gun at his hip as he peered into the gathering darkness. "Were you expecting anyone?" Zara asked, tension replacing the peaceful mood of moments before. "No," Tucker replied, stepping in front of her protectively. "Stay here while I see who it is." But before he could move toward the steps, the rider came into view, one of the ranch hands who had been in town for supplies. "Mr. Nathan's," the young man called out, reining in his horse. "Got news you need to hear right away." "What is it, Billy?" Tucker asked, his posture relaxing slightly at the sight of his employee. Billy dismounted, removing his hat respectfully as he approached the porch. "There's a man in town asking questions about Miss Miller. Eastern fellow, fancy clothes, offering money for information on her whereabouts." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. "James Thornton," she whispered. "He's found me." Tucker's expression hardened, but his voice remained calm. "What else, Billy? Has this man said why he's looking for Miss Miller?" Billy shifted uncomfortably. "Says she stole something valuable from his wife. Family heirloom or some such. Most folks aren't believing him outright. You've got too much respect for that. But he's staying at the hotel. Says he won't leave until he finds her." "Thank you for the warning," Tucker said, pressing a coin into the young man's hand. "Get yourself something to eat in the bunkhouse, then get some rest." After Billy had gone, Zara turned to Tucker, fear evident in her expression. "What do we do? He'll come here next." "Everyone knows I'm at the Double N." Tucker's face was grim but determined. "We stick to our plan. We get married tomorrow, as intended. Once you're my wife, Thornton will have no legal standing to make accusations against you. And if he claims you stole something, he'll need proof, which he doesn't have because it never happened." "You don't know him," Zara argued. "He'll fabricate evidence if necessary. He's determined to ruin me completely." "Why?" Tucker demanded. "What possible reason could he have for pursuing you so relentlessly after all this time?" Zara shook her head helplessly. "I don't know. Wounded pride, perhaps, or fear that I'll speak out about what really happened, damage his reputation in Boston society." Tucker was silent for a moment, his mind clearly working through the situation. "There's more to it," he said finally. "No man travels thousands of miles and offers substantial rewards merely to salve his pride or prevent gossip that would have died down months ago." The observation gave Zara pause. Tucker was right. James Thornton's pursuit seemed disproportionate to the perceived offense. What could he possibly fear from her after all this time? "The night he attacked me," she said slowly, memories surfacing that she had tried to suppress. "There were papers on the desk in the library. He seemed anxious about them, kept glancing at them during our confrontation. I never knew what they contained." "Business papers," Tucker suggested. "Something incriminating, perhaps, possibly," Zara agreed. The Thornton Shipping Company had been facing financial difficulties. There were rumors of improper practices, though nothing was ever proven. Tucker's expression turned thoughtful. "And you were in the room with those papers. Even if you didn't raid them, he can't be certain of that. He may fear you saw something that could expose him." The theory made sense, explaining Thornton's relentless pursuit in a way that mere injured pride could not. "If that's true, he's even more dangerous than I feared," Zara said quietly. "He's not just trying to discredit me, he's trying to silence me." "All the more reason to proceed with our plans," Tucker said firmly. "My wife will have protections that Zara Miller alone does not. And I promise you this, Zara James Thornton will not harm you, not while I draw breath." The fierce protectiveness in his voice both comforted and concerned Zara. She had no doubt of Tucker's courage or his determination to defend her, but she couldn't bear the thought of him facing danger because of her past. "Perhaps we should postpone the wedding," she suggested reluctantly. "Deal with Thornton first, then proceed when it's safe." Tucker shook his head. "That's exactly what he wants to disrupt your life, to keep you running and afraid. We're getting married tomorrow, as planned. Then we'll face Thornton together as husband and wife." His certainty steadied Zara's nerves. This was why she loved him: his unwavering courage, his refusal to be intimidated, his absolute faith in their future together. "Together, then," she agreed, drawing strength from his resolve. They spent the remainder of the evening making preparations, both for their wedding and for the potential confrontation with James Thornton. Tucker sent word to his foreman to increase vigilance around the ranch perimeter and to alert him immediately if any strangers approached. Zara, meanwhile, completed the final touches on her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of pale blue silk that she had ordered from Phoenix. Despite the shadow cast by Thornton's arrival in Apache Junction, Zara found herself focusing on the joy of the coming day rather than the threat he represented. Whatever happened, she would face it as Tucker Nathan's wife, with his strength and love to support her. The circuit judge arrived mid-morning the following day, his dusty buggy rolling up to the main house, just as Zara was putting the finishing touches on her appearance. She had arranged her dark hair in a simple updo, adorned with small white flowers from the garden. The blue dress complemented her eyes and brought a glow to her complexion that had been absent during her anxious days in Apache Junction. Mrs. Holloway had surprised Zara by arriving early to help with preparations, bringing a small bouquet of desert wildflowers and offering to assist with her dress and hair. The innkeeper's support meant more to Zara than she could express, a sign that not everyone in the community judged her by rumors and gossip. "You look beautiful, my dear," Mrs. Holloway said, adjusting the flowers in Zara's hair. "Tucker Nathan's is a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Zara replied softly. "He believed in me when no one else would." The older woman's expression softened. "Sometimes it only takes one person's faith to change everything. Now, let's not keep your groom waiting. He's been pacing the porch for the last hour like a caged mountain lion." The ceremony took place in the double antiques parlor, which had been transformed for the occasion with flowers and ribbons. Despite the hasty preparations and the cloud of concern about Thornton, the setting was as beautiful as any formal church wedding Zara had attended in Boston. Tucker stood waiting for her beside the judge, his usual ranch attire replaced by a crisp dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. The expression on his face as Zara entered the room, wonder mingled with pride and profound love, would remain etched in her memory forever. The ranch hands and their families gathered as witnesses, along with a few trusted friends from Apache Junction who had known Tucker for years. It was a small gathering but filled with genuine goodwill and celebration. The judge's words were traditional and simple, yet they carried immense weight as Zara and Tucker exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish one another through whatever challenges life might bring. When Tucker slipped the gold band onto Zara's finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother, carefully preserved for this moment, she felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle from the broken young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach months ago. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the judge declared. "Mr. Nathan's, you may kiss your bride." Tucker's kiss was gentle yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. As they turned to face their guests, now officially husband and wife, applause and cheers filled the room. In that moment, James Thornton and his threats seemed distant and powerless against the strength of the bond Zara and Tucker had forged. The celebration continued throughout the afternoon, with a feast prepared by Mrs. Holloway and the ranch cook, music provided by several of the hands who played fiddle and guitar, and dancing on the wide porch as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. It was during a quiet moment, as Zara and Tucker stood slightly apart from their guests watching the sunset, that the sound of an approaching carriage broke into their contentment. "Are we expecting anyone else?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. A sense of dread settled over her as the carriage came into view, an expensive hired conveyance from town, carrying a single passenger whose silhouette was all too familiar. "Stay here," Tucker said quietly, his hand squeezing hers reassuringly. "Let me handle this." But Zara shook her head, squaring her shoulders. "No, we face him together, remember? I'm not hiding anymore." Pride flashed in Tucker's eyes as he nodded. "Together, then." They moved forward as the carriage stopped before the house. James Thornton descended, every bit as imposing as Zara remembered, tall, impeccably dressed, his bearing that of a man accustomed to deference and obedience. His gaze fixed on Zara, a mixture of triumph and cold anger in his expression. "At last," he said, his Boston accent pronounced against the backdrop of Western voices. "You've led me quite a chase, Miss Miller." "Mrs. Nathan's," Tucker corrected firmly, stepping slightly forward. "You're addressing my wife, Mr. Thornton, and you're trespassing on private property." Thornton's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the decorations, the gathered guests, the gold band on Zara's finger. How convenient! A hasty marriage to avoid the consequences of your actions. "The only actions requiring consequences are yours, Mr. Thornton," Zara replied, her voice steadier than she had thought possible. "Your pursuit ends here. I have nothing you want, and I pose no threat to you." A thin smile crossed Thornton's face. "On the contrary, my dear. You have something that belongs to my wife, a family heirloom of considerable value. I've come to retrieve it." "That's a lie," Zara said evenly. "I took nothing from your household except my own possessions. Whatever game you're playing, it won't work here." By now, several of the ranch hands had moved closer, their postures indicating readiness to intervene if necessary. The judge had also approached, his official presence adding weight to Tucker and Zara's position. "Is there a problem here?" the judge inquired, his gaze shifting between Thornton and the newly married couple. "No problem at all, Your Honor," Tucker replied before Thornton could speak. "Mr. Thornton was just leaving. He seems to have made a long journey based on mistaken information." Thornton's expression hardened. "This woman is a thief and a liar. She fled Boston after stealing a valuable necklace from my wife's jewelry collection. I have sworn statements to that effect." "Forgeries, no doubt," Tucker said dismissively. "My wife has been here for months, working honorably, building a reputation for integrity that stands against your baseless accusations." The judge studied Thornton with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to evaluating truthfulness. "You have a warrant for this woman's arrest, sir." "Any official documentation from law enforcement in Massachusetts?" Thornton hesitated, clearly not having anticipated this question. "The local authorities here should be sufficient to search her belongings and recover my wife's property." "That's not how the law works in the Arizona Territory," the judge informed him dryly. "Without proper documentation from the jurisdiction where the alleged crime occurred, you have no standing to demand any such search." Frustration flashed across Thornton's face. "This is absurd." "I've traveled thousands of miles, on a fool's errand, it seems," Tucker interrupted. "Whatever your true motive in pursuing my wife, Mr. Thornton, it ends today. Return to Boston. There's nothing for you here. For a moment, it seemed Thornton might continue to argue. Then, abruptly, his demeanor changed. The anger faded, replaced by a calculating smile that sent a chill down Zara's spine. Perhaps you're right, Mr. Nathans. It seems I've been misled about certain matters. His gaze shifted to Zara, cold and threatening despite his conciliatory words. I apologize for interrupting your celebration. Please carry on. With a slight bow, he turned and climbed back into the carriage. As the driver urged the horses forward, Thornton looked back once, his expression making it clear that this retreat was tactical rather than final. He's not giving up, Zara said quietly as the carriage disappeared down the road. He's just changing his approach. Tucker nodded, his arm tightening around her waist. Probably, but neither are we. Whatever his game is, we'll face it together. The judge approached them, his expression concerned. That man seems determined. If I were you, I'd be vigilant in the coming days, and perhaps consult a lawyer about obtaining a restraining order. I am a lawyer, Your Honor, Tucker revealed, surprising both the judge and several of the nearby guests. Or was before I took over the ranch. I'm well aware of our legal options and will pursue them if necessary. As their guests gradually departed, an evening settled over the Double N. Zara and Tucker retreated to the privacy of the master bedroom, now their shared space. The tension of Thornton's appearance had cast a shadow over the latter part of their wedding day, but it couldn't diminish the fundamental joy of their union. I'm sorry he came, Zara said as she sat at the dressing table, removing the flowers from her hair. Today of all days. Tucker moved behind her, his hands gently covering hers. Don't apologize for his actions. Nothing he did today changed what matters. You're my wife, Zara Nathans, and I love you more than I can express. She turned to face him, drawing strength from his unwavering support. And I love you. I wish my past didn't keep intruding on our present. The past shapes us, but it doesn't define us, Tucker said, drawing her to her feet and into his embrace. Whatever Thornton's true motives, whatever happens next, we'll face it as we've faced everything else together. His kiss banished thoughts of James Thornton, replacing anxiety with desire and love. Tonight belonged to them alone, a beginning rather than an ending, a promise of all the tomorrows they would build together. The following days brought no further sign of Thornton, though Tucker maintained increased vigilance around the ranch. Several of the hands reported seeing a stranger watching the property from distant ridges, but no direct approach was made. He's waiting for something, Zara observed as she and Tucker sat on the porch a week after their wedding. Gathering information, perhaps, or waiting for an opportunity when we're vulnerable. Tucker nodded, his expression thoughtful. I've been thinking about what you said about the papers you saw in his library the night he attacked you. What if they contained evidence of criminal activity? Fraud, perhaps, or embezzlement. It's possible, Zara agreed. The Thornton Shipping Company had been facing financial difficulties. There were rumors of investors withdrawing their support, though nothing was ever confirmed publicly. If Thornton was engaging in illegal practices to keep his company afloat, and he believed you might have seen evidence of it, that would explain his persistence, Tucker reasoned. He's not just worried about a scandal, he's worried about prison. The theory made sense, explaining Thornton's relentless pursuit and his willingness to travel so far from Boston. It also suggested that he wouldn't give up easily. The stakes were too high. What should we do? Zara asked. Go to the authorities with our suspicions. Tucker shook his head. Without evidence, it would be our word against his. And Thornton has resources we don't, money, connections, the appearance of respectability. So we wait, Zara concluded, frustration evident in her tone. Allow him to make the next move, whatever it might be. For now, Tucker agreed, but we'll be prepared. And in the meantime, we live our life, Zara. We don't let him steal any more happiness from us than he already has. True to his word, Tucker ensured that their first weeks of marriage were filled with joy, despite the shadow of Thornton's presence in Apache Junction. They worked side by side on the ranch, Zara now fully involved in Tucker's plans for expanding the operation, offering insights from her own education and experience that complemented his vision. In the evenings, they continued their habit of sitting on the porch, discussing books and ideas, planning improvements to the house, dreaming of the family they hoped to create together. The physical aspect of their marriage proved as rewarding as the emotional Tucker's consideration and tenderness, healing the last of Zara's wounded trust in ways she hadn't thought possible. It was during one such evening, as they sat watching the stars emerge above the distant mountains, that Zara first noticed the flicker of firelight where no fire should be. "Tucker," she said quietly, pointing toward the northern pasture, "is someone supposed to be camping out there?" Tucker followed her gaze, instantly alert. "No, the hands are all at the bunkhouse tonight." He rose, reaching for the rifle that was never far from hand these days. "Stay here while I check." "Be careful," Zara urged, a sense of foreboding settling over her as Tucker strode toward the barn to saddle his horse. From the porch, she watched as he rode out toward the distant light, his figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as she waited for his return, jumping at every sound from the surrounding night. Finally, the sound of hoofbeats announced Tucker's approach. Zara rushed to meet him as he dismounted, relief flooding through her at the sight of him unharmed. "What was it?" she asked anxiously. Tucker's expression was grim. "A diversion. Someone set a small fire in the north pasture, just enough to draw attention. While I was investigating, they broke into the house." "What?" Zara gasped, turning to look at the seemingly undisturbed building. "How do you know?" "Back door's been forced open," Tucker said, leading her around the side of the house to show her the splintered wood around the lock. "They were looking for something." Inside, the evidence of the intruder's search was subtle but clear to those who knew the house intimately. Drawers in Tucker's study had been carefully searched, their contents replaced to avoid immediate detection. The box where they kept important documents had been opened, though nothing appeared to be missing. What were they looking for? Zara wondered aloud, a chill running through her at the violation of their home. "Not what who," Tucker corrected. "They didn't take anything because they didn't find what they came for. They were looking for you, Zara. This was Thornton's work." The realization struck Zara like a physical blow. "He meant to abduct me while you were distracted by the fire." Tucker nodded, anger evident in every line of his body. "It's time to end this. Tomorrow, we're going into town to confront him directly. This has gone far beyond accusations or rumors." Breaking and entering, attempted abduction, these are serious crimes, even for a man of Thornton's standing. That night, neither of them slept well despite Tucker's insistence on taking turns keeping watch. The thought of Thornton's audacity, his willingness to resort to such tactics, left Zara both frightened and furious. What right did he have to continue disrupting her life, to threaten the happiness she had found with Tucker? Morning found them preparing for the confrontation in Apache Junction. Tucker insisted that several of his most trusted ranch hands accompany them, not as a show of force, but as witnesses to whatever transpired. "I don't want it to be just our word against his," he explained as they rode toward town. "The more eyes and ears present, the better." Apache Junction appeared quiet in the early morning light, the main street largely deserted except for a few early risers heading to work. The hotel where Thornton had taken rooms stood at the far end, its facade more imposing than the surrounding buildings. As they dismounted in front of the hotel, the door opened and James Thornton himself emerged, dressed for travel. He halted momentarily at the sight of Tucker and Zara, then continued down the steps with feigned nonchalance. "Mr. and Mrs. Nathan's," he greeted them, his tone pleasant though his eyes remained cold. "What brings you into town so early?" "You know exactly why we're here, Thornton," Tucker replied, his voice level despite the anger Zara could sense beneath his controlled exterior. "Last night's attempt to break into our home and abduct my wife crossed a line even you should recognize." Thornton's expression registered brief surprise before smoothing into practiced innocence. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been here at the hotel all night, as the staff can verify. Paying someone else to do your dirty work doesn't absolve you of responsibility," Zara said, finding her voice despite the fear that Thornton's presence still evoked. "We know you were behind it." Thornton's gaze shifted to her, and for a moment the mask of civility slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Accusations without proof are meaningless, my dear, as you should well know from our previous misunderstandings." "This is different," Tucker interjected. "We have witnesses to the break-in, evidence of forced entry, and we've filed a report with the territorial authorities. Any further attempts against my wife or my property will be met with the full force of the law." Something flickered in Thornton's eyes, concern, perhaps, or frustration at having his plans disrupted. Then he smiled, a thin expression that held no warmth. "As I said, I know nothing about any break-in. I'm merely a businessman attempting to recover stolen property." His gaze returned to Zara. "Though I'm beginning to think the effort might exceed the value. Some losses must simply be accepted, I suppose." There was an undercurrent to his words that Zara couldn't quite decipher, a hidden meaning that seemed to go beyond the surface conversation. Before she could respond, Thornton continued, "In fact, I've decided to return to Boston today. The stage departs in an hour." He inclined his head slightly. "I wish you both a long and interesting life together." With that, he stepped past them and continued down the street toward the stage office, his posture rigid with suppressed anger despite his conciliatory words. "He's giving up," Zara whispered, disbelief evident in her tone. "Just like that." Tucker's expression remained wary as he watched Thornton's retreating figure. "I don't trust it. There's something we're missing." They remained in town, watching from a distance as Thornton boarded the eastbound stage an hour later, his luggage loaded onto the roof of the vehicle. Only when the stage had disappeared from view, carrying Thornton away from Apache Junction, did Tucker's posture relax slightly. "Let's go home," he said, helping Zara onto her horse. "But we'll maintain our vigilance for a while longer. I won't feel completely at ease until he's well beyond the Arizona territory." The ride back to the Double N was quieter than the journey into town, both of them absorbed in their thoughts about the confrontation. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that Thornton's retreat had been too easy, too abrupt after months of relentless pursuit. What did he mean by some losses must simply be accepted? She wondered aloud as they approached the ranch. It felt like he was talking about something specific. "I've been thinking the same thing," Tucker agreed. There was something calculated about his decision to leave, as if he'd received information that changed his strategy. As they crested the final rise before the ranch house came into view, both of them reined in their horses simultaneously. Below, the Double N was in chaos, ranch hands running between buildings, smoke rising from what appeared to be the partly constructed east wing of the house. "Fire!" Tucker shouted, spurring his horse forward. Zara followed close behind. heart pounding with fear as they galloped toward the burning structure. By the time they reached the house, the ranch hands had formed a bucket brigade from the well to the east wing. The fire was contained to that section of the building, but it burned fiercely, consuming the new lumber and construction materials. "What happened?" Tucker demanded as he leapt from his horse and joined the firefighting effort. "Started about 30 minutes ago, boss," one of the hands reported between heaving buckets. "Nobody saw how it began, just noticed the smoke and raised the alarm." Zara joined the women who had come from the nearby homesteads to help, passing buckets and offering water to the exhausted men fighting the blaze. The smell of smoke filled the air, along with the crackle of burning wood and the shouts of the ranch hands as they coordinated their efforts. It took hours to fully extinguish the fire. By then, the east wing was largely destroyed, months of work and considerable investment reduced to charred timbers and ash. The main house had been saved, but smoke damage extended through much of the structure, and water from the firefighting efforts had soaked floors and furnishings. As evening fell, Zara found Tucker standing amid the ruins of the east wing, his expression somber as he surveyed the destruction. "This was his parting gift," she said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "Thornton didn't leave because he gave up. He left because he'd already arranged this, his final act of vengeance." Tucker nodded, reaching for her hand. "You're right. The timing is too perfect to be coincidence. He must have hired someone locally to set the fire once we were seen heading into town." "I'm so sorry," Zara whispered, guilt washing over her. "This is my fault. If I hadn't brought my past to your door—" "Stop," Tucker interrupted gently but firmly. "This is not your fault. It's the action of a vindictive, dangerous man who couldn't stand to lose control over someone he viewed as his property. You are not responsible for his choices." His words eased some of Zara's guilt, but the sight of the destroyed wing, the physical manifestation of Tucker's dreams for the future, remained a painful reminder of the cost of her presence in his life. "We'll rebuild," Tucker said, as if reading her thoughts. "Better than before." This was a setback, nothing more. Zara squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his resilience. "Yes, we will." In the days that followed, the true scope of Thornton's malice became clear. Not only had he arranged for the fire at the ranch, but he had also spread rumors in Apache Junction about Zara's past, embellished versions of the Boston scandal, designed to isolate them from community support during the rebuilding process. To Thornton's likely disappointment, the rumors failed to achieve their intended effect. The people of Apache Junction and the surrounding ranches rallied around Tucker and Zara, offering assistance with cleaning up after the fire and beginning reconstruction. Many had come to know Zara during her months in the community and judged her by her actions rather than by gossip from 2,000 miles away. "Thornton doesn't understand the West," Mrs. Holloway observed as she helped Zara salvage smoke-damaged linens from the main house. "Out here, we value what a person does more than what people say about them. You've proven yourself a good neighbor and a decent woman. That counts for more than rumors." The support of the community, combined with Tucker's unwavering love, helped Zara finally shed the last of her fear and shame about her past. James Thornton had tried his worst and failed. The life she and Tucker were building was stronger than his malice, more enduring than his vengeance. As spring turned to summer, work on rebuilding the East Wing progressed steadily. Tucker made modifications to the original plans, incorporating ideas that Zara had suggested: larger windows to capture the mountain views, a wider porch wrapping around the addition, a small library where they could share their mutual love of books. "It's going to be even better than I'd first imagined," Tucker said as they stood reviewing the construction one evening. Sometimes destruction creates space for improvement. Zara leaned against him, her hand resting lightly on her abdomen where the first subtle signs of new life had recently made themselves known. I believe you're right about that. Tucker followed her gesture, his eyes widening as he understood her meaning. Zara, are you? She nodded, joy illuminating her face. Dr. Mason confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Tucker. Next spring, if all goes well. The expression that crossed Tucker's face, wonder, joy, fierce protectiveness, all mingled together, was one Zara knew she would treasure forever. He gathered her carefully into his arms as if she had suddenly become infinitely precious and fragile. A baby, he whispered against her hair. Our baby. Yes, Zara confirmed, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. The beginning of our family. Tucker drew back slightly to look at her, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on her still flat stomach. I love you, Zara Nathans, more than I ever thought possible. And I love you, she replied, her heart full to overflowing. Thank you for believing in me when no one else would. For building this life with me. As they stood together, surrounded by the tangible evidence of their shared future, the half-built wing, the prosperous ranch, the child growing within Zara, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. James Thornton and Boston seemed a lifetime away, the wounds of that time healed by Tucker's love and her own resilience. They had weathered Thornton's worst and emerged stronger. Whatever challenges the future might hold, Zara knew they would face them together, building on the foundation they had created through mutual respect, unwavering support, and deep, abiding love. The past that others had claimed ruined her had instead led her to this moment, to Tucker, to the double N, to a future brighter than any she could have imagined when she stepped off that stagecoach in Apache Junction. Not ruined, but reborn. Not defined by what had been done to her, but by what she and Tucker were creating together. A new tomorrow, built one day at a time, with love as its cornerstone.